Right. Welcome everyone to today's webinar. Thanks for joining us. The topic today is, the goal is to provide an overview of GEFA's Helene resilience funding. My name is Stacey Isaac Barraza, and I'll be helping facilitate today's webinar. Just a couple logistics. Please note that the chat is sort of one way. The organizers of the webinar today and the panelists will be sending you as participants information via the chat, but we really welcome your questions. If you have questions or even if you have technical issues, please use the Q&A box that you'll see at the bottom of your screen so that we can address those questions. We will save a lot of time at the end of the webinar for questions, but feel free to enter your questions along the way and we'll queue those up for the end. Anyway, thanks for joining us today. Now I'll kick it over to Judy Adler, who is the head of GEFA's Water Resources Division. Take it away, Judy.
Thank you, Stacey. Good morning, everybody. I'm so excited to be here today to officially launch this new funding program at GEFA. It looks like we had over 200 people signed up for this webinar, which is wonderful. A lot of familiar names as well. Before we get started, I wanted to recognize a few people. Kevin Kelly, that many of you know, he helped us plan this program while GEFA is hiring and onboarding new employees at the division. So I want to give a shout out to Kevin as well as Stacey as well for helping us with the program. It truly was a team effort with a lot of folks involved. I also want to thank all of the stakeholders that were interviewed in different focus groups that help with the planning as well. You know who you are. Thank you very much. So GEFA has been growing because our funding and the number of projects and programs that we have at GEFA has been growing as well. We have hired 4 new team members in the Water Resources Division over the last 4 months. So you will be seeing some new faces. One of those individuals is Haley Cotton, who came to GEFA from FEMA, and she is one of the speakers on our call today as well. We're putting her to work really quickly. So Haley and Andrew Briscoe, that many of you know, will be managing this program at GEFA. So the other thing that I want to mention is that our call for projects, not only for this program, but also for the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, and the Georgia Fund went live last week on October 1st. So I encourage everyone to look at that information on our website. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so this is the agenda for our webinar over the next hour. We're going to give a little bit of background on the program, talk specifics like eligible projects, eligible entities, talk about the timeline, and discuss next steps. We don't have a lot of slides because we want to make sure that we leave plenty of time for your questions, your answers, and again, to focus on what the next steps will be. Next slide, please. So again, I saw a lot of familiar names on the RSVP list, but I saw some new ones as well. So I wanted to make sure that I went over briefly who is GEFA, especially the Water Resources Division and the water programs we have. Essentially, GEFA is a state infrastructure bank, and we finance water infrastructure projects throughout the state of Georgia. There are a lot of ways that we're different from a bank. However, we do provide subsidy, which is called principal forgiveness. We'll talk about that in a little while. Banks do not provide that. We do have some grant programs at GEFA as well. And obviously, we don't make a profit like banks do. Our profits are improved public health, more affordable water for Georgians throughout the state, healthier watersheds, and we also enable economic development in the state of Georgia through water infrastructure. A few things that I do want to point out in this slide are eligible entities, eligible borrowers, and grantees at GEFA. So counties and municipalities, that can be towns or cities, are definitely eligible, as are authorities and districts that have been blessed by the legislature. The other thing I wanted to mention, and this is new information at GEFA, we actually were working with the Attorney General's office in Georgia just to make sure legally we were sending the right information. So I wanted to mention that state agencies, so that could be, you know, uh, state authorities, public health entities at the local level or the state level, also regional commissions and state colleges and universities are also eligible. Private entities are not eligible, with the exception of nonprofit organizations, if it is a project that is focused on land conservation only. I think many of us on this webinar understand the water quality benefits of land conservation projects, so that is why we have that as an eligibility. We did receive a question about nonprofits being eligible. I will say that I encourage nonprofits for other types of projects. You can partner with any of these other types of eligible borrowers that are public organizations and be part of the implementation team for a project. However, the funding needs to go through one of those other entities unless it's specifically for a land conservation project. The other thing that I wanted to point out is the eligible types of projects that we can fund. We can fund planning, we can fund design and engineering, and we can fund construction or capital projects. We cannot finance O&M, operation and maintenance at GEFA. Next slide, please. So I think you all know the impacts of Hurricane Helene on the southeastern United States were just absolutely devastating. Devastating for so many homes, businesses, agriculture, forestry, as well as infrastructure. And we are here to talk about water infrastructure today. So after Hurricane Helene in December of 2024, Congress passed the American Relief Act. And you might see this acronym SAHMW. A lot of folks call it SAM. So that stands for Supplemental Appropriations for Hurricanes Helene, Milton, and Hawaii wildfires. 7 states were awarded funding as part of this. Actually, I should say allotted. Sorry, I apologize for that. It's an important distinction. 7 states were allotted funding for water resilience projects as part of the American Relief Act, totaling $3 billion. The allotment for the state of Georgia is a little less than 500 million for the state. And as you can see from the blue flag, there are 3 different funding pots or sub-programs that are part of that allocation. There's an allocation for clean water, there's allocation for the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, and one for decentralized wastewater, which we'll talk about later, that's focused more on septic systems. One thing that I want to point out is that GEFA will have the ability to transfer some funding from between the clean water and the drinking water funds. You can see the allotment for drinking water is considerably higher compared to clean water. What we've decided to do is go ahead and see what projects we get and make that determination whether we want to transfer funds at a later time, depending on the projects that come in the door. Okay, I think that is it for me. So I'm going to turn it over to Andrew Briscoe on our team to get more into the details on the program.
Good morning, everybody. As Judy said, I'm Andrew Briscoe. I'm a project manager here at GEFA and one of the leads on the Hurricane Helene Resilience Funding, along with Haley Cotton. I will discuss project purposes, so what our funding can be used for, some example projects, go through our decentralized funding, and some principal forgiveness and some topics like that. And then Haley will wrap up the webinar for everybody. So just to go through project purposes, the funding for the appropriation was for Helene resilience funding. The funding must be used to enhance resilience of wastewater and drinking water facilities and equipment to flooding, rapid hydrologic change, and/or natural disaster. The slide in front of you shows the specific language that EPA put in the March 2025 implementation memo. It does mention fire damage as an eligible expense or an eligible project, since the funding is for the Helene or the Hawaii wildfires as well, but we're going to focus primarily on flood damage and storm and flood resilience in Georgia. Um, our funding is going to mainly stay with the disaster declaration that exists for Georgia. Because of this, projects must demonstrate impact from Hurricane Helene. We'll go in a little bit more detail as to what demonstrating your impact means in a few slides. Next slide, please. This slide just shows a few different types of example projects. This is not comprehensive list. The list is much longer. We encourage anybody to reach out to us if you have a question on whether your project will be eligible. There's a good chance it could be. We love to talk with you about what in your project could be eligible or ways that it could be. Um, just some common things that we can fund under this appropriation: backup generators, transfer switches, waterproofing of pumps and electrical equipment, relocation out of high risk flood areas, um, separation of combined sewers, planning projects such as asset management plans or risk and vulnerability assessments as well. We want to emphasize planning projects uh, are eligible at GEFA all the time, but especially with this funding, a lot of communities you want to know, how can I plan for the next event? We hope that there isn't a next one, but we know there will be one. So if you're trying to get your community to plan for the next impact, this funding can be used for that as well. Next slide, please. Decentralized wastewater. This is a funding source that GEFA really is not commonly involved with. So um, we want to make sure everybody understands what decentralized means. Decentralized wastewater treatment systems treat domestic wastewater from homes and businesses that are not served by a centralized public sewer system. The most common form is a septic tank or a septic system that treats household or residential or commercial wastewater on site. In some cases, that may be a cluster system that can treat wastewater from two or more buildings, or it may be a package plant, which is a prefabricated, self-contained mechanical treatment facility. It may serve one property, it may serve more. What makes it different? In most cases, owners or homeowners or private entities. As Judy just mentioned, we can't fund private entities or homeowners for a lot of things. So that means that in most cases, you're going to have to coordinate with a community or a nonprofit or somebody that is not a nonprofit, but the nonprofit would have to coordinate with a community or a eligible entity for the project. And it will usually require close coordination between the eligible entity, the nonprofit, the homeowner, GEFA, um, to be successful and properly use the funding. We anticipate a lot of smaller projects coming in under this funding. We know it's only $9 million out of our appropriation, but we expect it'll be a lot of, small components put together. Um, all of that to say, though, this is a learning process for GEFA. We're not, super involved with decentralized funding in a lot of cases. So please reach out to us if you have questions on the funding. We're learning along the way as a lot of communities are. Um, One thing we have created are these project models. Um, on the next slide, you'll see some project models and uh, eligible projects for decentralized wastewater, um, such as septic consolidation, um, or projects that um, that protect systems from rising water. They protect decentralized systems from power risk or system failure, increase capacity to handle flood risk, consolidate systems to reduce flood risk, or assess the potential to connect homes served by these decentralized systems to a centralized wastewater system, septic to sewer, and making connections. We've come up with 6 project models or sorry, 9 project types that fit into 6 categories, um, that outline the goals, activities that can be funded, the recipients of the funding, how the funds would flow, and some examples. We hope that the project models will help communities plan your decentralized projects. Um, but please reach out to us. We know it's new. We know that you may not be super familiar with how we're doing that. If we can go to the next slide, please. So these are the six project models that we've come up with, or nine, sorry, nine project models into six categories. Those categories are septic consolidation, a responsible management entity for on-site system resilience, direct support for private decentralized wastewater owners. That could be by compensating private system owners for completing some resilience enhancement on their septic systems through loans, financing, or reimbursement. In this case, that would have to go through a local government or a community development financial institution or a CDFI. Resiliency planning, subject to sewer feasibility studies, risk or vulnerability assessments, or alternative analysis. Stormwater improvements, with the focus on reducing flooding in areas with high concentrations of decentralized systems. Um, you can find a lot more on our website. We encourage you to reach out to us. Like I said, we're still learning through a lot of this process, so your project may not fit one of these models neatly, but don't worry, that doesn't mean it's not eligible. Next slide, please. This is the eligible locations map. So this is the disaster declaration map on the federal side as of November 4th, 2024. For clean water and drinking water projects, you must be in one of these shaded counties in the red, yellowish, orange, and green to be eligible. Or you have to be able to demonstrate impact from the hurricane. For what constitutes demonstrating impact, that could be anything from your power outage data, your hours offline to your storm impact, receipts of repairs, um, or rental equipment, things like that. There's no set list. Unfortunately, we can't say, you definitely need one of these things, but if you can demonstrate your impact, that's how you could be eligible for clean water or drinking water funding. If you have questions, again, please reach out to GEFA. We're here to help as much as we can. For decentralized projects, they are eligible statewide, that even if you're not in one of those shaded counties. However, in our scoring system, if you are in one of these counties, you'll receive extra points. And the extra points will also be allocated related to your storm impacts. Next slide, please. All right, now we get to the fun topic, principal forgiveness. So for clean water and drinking water SRF, all projects will receive a base principal forgiveness of 30%. Additional principal forgiveness may be awarded based on your county's or your municipality's affordability score, your project score, and your community's financial position. So our affordability score is in an affordability index that is on our website. It is published for all of the communities in Georgia. Um, we'll go more into detail on that in a second. For planning projects under Clean Water and Drinking Water SRF funding, you will receive 100% principal forgiveness. However, the project must be reasonably expected to result in a capital project. And it cannot be for addressing planning activities required by law or regulation. So we need your community's planning project to go above and beyond what's required to receive 100% principal forgiveness. For decentralized funding, decentralized wastewater projects will receive 100% principal forgiveness for all projects. Next slide. So we mentioned affordability criteria. There are 10 basic criteria: median household income, percent unemployment, percent not on labor force, percent on social security income or supplemental security income. Your community receives a score from 1 to 4 based on how it ranks statewide in these first 10. That gives you a score between 10 and 40. Newer at GEFA, we've added the number of service connections as an 11th criteria that can either add points depending on the size of your community. Smaller communities receive more points, or larger communities can even lose a few points as we want to focus on funding going to the communities that need it most. So for this, like I said, everything is on our website. All the data in here is pulled from the US Census Bureau. Um, and a higher score means a community is experiencing greater financial hardship compared to the rest of the state. So a score potentially of 55 is available. If your community scores a 55, that means you're essentially one of the communities struggling the most in Georgia when it comes to financial hardship. Next slide, please. In this slide, this just goes over our current 20-year interest rates through the Georgia Fund Drinking Water SRF and Clean Water SRF. Interest rate discounts are available for Water First, Plan First, small and disadvantaged communities, and conservation projects. Um, I just want to post this slide and just mention that our interest rates are adjusted 1 to 2 times a year. So this may not be the interest rate that is available once your application is scored and we actually get to the actual loan execution. Um, However, this can give you an idea for planning for your community. Now, I am going to pass it on over to Haley Cotton to go over our project scoring, next steps, and some other resources that you may find helpful.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andrew. So yeah, like Andrew said, wrapping up here before we get to the Q&A. So this is the scoring criteria for our clean water and drinking water programs. I will say that the decentralized wastewater scoring criteria is slightly different. It has a lot of the same stuff, and all three of these can be found on our website, but I just wanted to let everybody know, generally what you're being scored on when you're submitting your pre-application. So we've got system resilience. We, of course, want to see that resilience component. Project priority types, which are identified in the pre-application. Priority planning elements. So you're going to get some extra points if you are planning, of course, above and beyond those regulatory requirements. Readiness to proceed, so your ability to, shovel ready basically for these projects and get moving as soon as you're awarded the money. And then priority applicant status, and that's going to be things like Water First or other priority applicants through GEFA. And so all of the totals are out of 100. And you will be scored, and that will help GEFA with their priority of projects to bring to the board when we go to submit for funding. And so this is just a little table that kind of takes all of the information we've talked about today and compares them to each other. So we have the amount, the allotment that Georgia's received for each program. Of course, this can change a little bit depending on all the applications that we receive. A couple of things that I do want to highlight are the differences. So for loan maximums, clean water and drinking water, we do not have any loan maximums. However, for decentralized, we do have a maximum loan amount of 2 million. That's because we want to, it's a smaller pot of money and we want to, we are anticipating more numerous smaller projects just in that funding pot. As well as principal forgiveness. For decentralized, all projects are 100% principal forgiveness, as well as our planning projects under any of the SRF funding, and then minimum for 30% principal forgiveness for drinking water and clean water, and that could be adjusted higher depending on your affordability score that you get. Of course, all of these projects for drinking water and clean water must be in a designated area or demonstrate Helene impact. The only caveat to that is decentralized. You don't have to be in a demonstrated impact area, but you will get higher points in your scoring if you are. Alrighty, so for next steps, our call for projects, as Judy stated earlier, is open now. They're open for all of GEFA's SRF programs, so not just Helene funding. It opened October 1st. So you're really encouraged to submit your pre-applications. For Helene funding only, the deadline is December 31st, 2025. So we do highly suggest you go through the pre-application early to determine what kind of backup documentation you might need or any explanations you might be asked for your specific project. You'll also have the ability to go back and save for your pre-application. So don't feel the need to fill it all out the first time that you look at it. You can save and then go back and re-access before you submit if you have to upload anything else or make some changes throughout this process. As for our presentations, any fact sheets and memos we've mentioned, all of this is going to be on our website, gefa.georgia.gov, under the Helene Resilience Funding page. We're also going to upload this webinar after we are recording. That way you can go back and access or share with other members of your municipalities just to spread the information. And then in addition to that, we are going to follow up this webinar probably in about a week with attachments of some of these resources that we've mentioned today. So hopefully by the end of this, you will have all of the information that you need to go back and reference. The last thing I'm going to mention is office hours with GEFA. The first week of November, I believe it's the 3rd through the 7th, GEFA is going to be offering 30-minute time slots each day of that week where you can sign up and you can bring, as many people you want from your municipality or organization, where you can meet with a GEFA project manager to discuss maybe very specifics of your project, to discuss eligibility requirements, or if you have any other questions about both the Helene Resilience Funding and all of our other programs as well. We'll have subject matter experts who can speak on any of our available funding options. So that's definitely something that I encourage you to utilize. And of course, that will be sent out via email as a follow-up to this webinar as well. And then if all else fails and you've looked at our website or you really have a very specific question that you can't find an answer to, please email our Helene funding mailbox. The email is right there on the screen. Andrew and I will be monitoring that daily and getting back to you with any specific questions or answers that you need. We definitely like working with communities and trying to work with you guys to figure out what can be eligible and what projects your community needs so that you can submit your applications. Just going to briefly show this. This is the project life cycle. So right now we are in the pre-application stage. After the December 31st deadline, we will move forward with the full application. Between pre-application and the full application is when GEFA submits to EPA for their funding allotment. We'll submit an IUP, intended use plan, and basically tell them how we intend to use these funds that we will receive. And then you will get a notification from GEFA from your project manager at every step in this process. So you'll know exactly where you stand in this life cycle. And then just before I pass it off for the Q&A, I wanted to mention we have a one-day workshop coming up next week in Carrollton, Georgia. This is through the Funders Forum, the Georgia Funders Forum. It's in Carrollton, and we will be having a couple different speakers. We will be having some networking events and just the ability for anybody that is funding both state and federal funds to get together, get some resources, as well as talk with each other and maybe crank ideas out about how they can fund. I know one of the topics that we will be talking about is about co-funding projects, which could come in use for this funding source. And I think it's going to be a good turnout. Andrew and I are both going to be there. Stacy's going to be there. So it'll be a great time. You can scan this QR code or click the link in the chat if you want to register, and we hope to see you there. And if you'd like, this is our QR code. This is just going to go to our website if you haven't already, gotten that out of our slides. I think it'll also be dropped in the chat. It's just gefa.georgia.gov. And so you can find all of the Helene resources, the call for projects, as well as any of the documents and resources that we've mentioned today. And then I am going to pass this off to Stacy to facilitate our question and answer. So feel free to ask any questions that you got so far.
Great. Thank you, Haley, and the rest of the team. Thank you to Judy and Andrew for your presentations. So I'll invite y'all to come back on screen, if you will. We also have Kevin Kelly, who Julie mentioned, has really been doing a lot of work on this Helene Resilience funding. So Kevin is here to help answer questions too. And we also have Amy and Chris with EPA Region 4, depending on the types of questions that we got. So you all have been very active. We have several questions. I will reiterate, though, it helps us as the organizers and panelists if you will put the questions in the Q&A box that's located at the bottom of your screen, as opposed to the chat. It's a little bit more difficult for us to monitor the chat. But yes, so Kevin has been typing. We've answered a few questions actually, among two or three of us by the Q&A, and hopefully folks can see that. So I just want to mention that Catherine said that they're having trouble accessing and downloading data from census right now, probably because of the government shutdown. So I believe this relates, Andrew and Haley, especially to the affordability index information. So I don't know if you want to reiterate anything about where they can find. We've had several questions about like where communities can find their affordability index. And I believe Catherine's concern about census data has to do with the affordability index as well. So Andrew, do you want to add anything else there?
Sure. It is so our affordability score tool or index, it's available on our website. If you go to, I believe it's water financing and then the call for projects page, it is listed under the resources section on that page. So your community, you don't have to go in and check and calculate your own affordability score. It's already done for you. So hopefully if you're missing any data or struggling with that, that's not anything you have to worry about for this funding.
Perfect. Thank you, Andrew. And that link to that affordability index should be in the chat already. So I'm getting some thumbs up reaction. So thank you. Thank you, Andrew. I think that satisfied those concerns there. I will say too, we've had a couple questions, like for instance, from Jackie Jackson, to repeat the number of connections. Can you repeat scoring for the number of connections? And does the loan origination fee, and she has that in inverted commas, cost get reimbursed if the principal forgiveness is triggered? Let me read that one more time, Andrew. Can you repeat scoring for the number of connections? And does the loan origination fee cost get reimbursed if the principal forgiveness is triggered?
So for the number of connections, if it's below, and Judy may have to correct me on this because I get these numbers mixed up sometimes. If it's below 500 connections, a community gets 15 bonus points. If it's between 501 and 1,000, Judy, correct me if I'm wrong on that one.
I'm gonna have to do research there. We'll put it in the
Um,
chat as far as the scoring. I will say it's important for folks to go on the water rates dashboard that UGA has, because that's where we're getting those number of connections data. That is I think that's the only piece of information that is not coming from the census data. So keep that in mind. It's important that we have the latest information for a community for that. But yeah, I'll have to get back to you on that one. And as far as the loan origination fee, right now, the policy is that fee is charged regardless of the principal forgiveness rate. If a community is having some sort of hardship, they can come talk to us about that.
Great. Thank you, Judy and Andrew. And some of your colleagues have been putting some of this information into the chat as well. So we got good tag teaming going on here. Probably we'll start with Andrew here as well, but let me reiterate, and we're gonna try to put this in the Q&A box too. The slides are all available right now. They are available off of GEFA's website, and we put a link to that. So we can repeat some stuff, but chances are what you're looking for is actually on the PDF version of the slides. But Andrew, Charles is asking, could you please repeat the examples of what information can be used to demonstrate impact from Helene? And in parentheses, he says, for those entities that are outside of the designated areas. And so we have a couple different iterations of that same question. And I know y'all covered it. Was anything else you want to add here, Andrew?
So to answer the first part, so just some examples. Power outage data, hours offline due to storm impact, if you have any documentation of that. Receipts of repairs or rental equipment, things like that. Basically anything that shows that you have an expense or your system was offline due to the storm. Um, in theory, that would be, around the time Helene was hitting, September 26th, 27th-ish. If your system was offline November 15th of last year, we probably can't use that. But if you have examples, it could be a lot more than that. Those are just some examples we've come up with. And then the second part of the question was, can you repeat the second part, Stacy?
Sure. And I'm rolling through here, but the second part was, let's see, I'll read the whole thing. Could you please repeat the examples of what information can be used to demonstrate impact from Helene for those entities that are outside of the designated areas?
Mhm. Okay. So that was the power outage data and stuff like that. Okay. And
Yeah,
then second part of that question?
I think that was the whole question.
Whole
Yeah.
question? Okay. Okay. My apologies.
No, it's okay. And Kevin, Kelly, did you have anything else to add about this demonstration of impact? We have another couple of questions too about, we want to apply for this funding. We're interested, but we're outside of that shaded area on the map. Anything to add there, Kevin?
Um, I might propose to put Amy Hughes on the spot a little bit. I think that there is some information that's available that when communities have applied for projects or made other submissions to the Emergency Operations Center, that data could also be useful. But I know Amy is familiar with that and she may be able to say more about it.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, so if you're a community that reached out for assistance during Helene, specifically if you had a resource request placed into the State Operations Center, those get tracked and there would be a track record of it being fulfilled. If you are a community that relied on mutual aid, and contacted mutual aid for assistance and you had resources delivered to you, even if there were no invoices that you had to pay out of pocket, but just proof that you had a need and that need was fulfilled. What we're looking for here is truly just proof that there was a need at your community. I've seen where some communities even send pictures of some extensive damage that has occurred. So it's not necessarily just so much about what your expenses were. It is, was there a need at your utility? Did you suffer damages? That is what we're looking for. So hopefully that helps.
Okay, great. Thank you, Amy and Kevin. All right, this one I will ask for some help from some of our co-panelists. Judy Smith is asking if we could provide the contact information for those who are in charge of this program so that they can, reach out to them after. So if somebody would type that answer and just not send it privately, but let everyone know, you can either do it in the Q&A box or the chat. But yeah,
Drop that in the chat for you, Stacy.
All right, Haley, you're on it. You've already done it. Okay, perfect. All right. Let's see. Ben is asking, Andrew may have said this, but I'm not sure. It's again about eligibility in the map. So maybe we just covered it in especially what Amy just added, but on the map, is the color coding of the counties relevant, or is any shaded county equally within the eligible area? I believe we just covered that, but with that phrasing, do y'all want to add anything else?
I will add that at least for decentralized, we are asking for information, or there may be relevance to those counties that are only eligible for individual assistance. But otherwise, the other coding is generally the ones that are eligible for public assistance. Well, the red and orange coded counties.
Great,
And
thank
green too, yeah, I just wanted to add. So outside of decentralized, I think just any shaded color is an adequate designation.
Okay. All right, thank you. And Courtney's asking, what type of conservation projects are eligible? If a conservation project results in avoided impacts, that is, it prevents septics from being installed in a vulnerable area, would that qualify? I don't know, Kevin, you want to start off on that one? I can read the question again. Kevin, you're on mute, but what type of conservation projects are eligible if a conservation project results in avoided impacts, for example, or that is prevent septics from being installed in a vulnerable area, would that qualify?
I'll try to take answer to that, and I welcome anybody else to contribute. One, conservation projects, there is a document that we linked, which is GEFA's financing conservation projects. So that would give a scope of overall what GEFA considers or finances as conservation projects. And if a conservation project resulted in, and I'll say generally making septic systems more resilient to flooding, I think that could be considered and may be eligible because that certainly fits. In terms of the septic systems from not being installed in vulnerable areas, I think we just have to know more about how that would work, how a conservation project would avoid the actual installation of septic systems in a vulnerable area. I think right now we're focused on actually avoiding flooding or impacts on those septic systems that are already in vulnerable areas. So I think we want more information about the project and how it would avoid the installation of those projects or the septic systems up front.
Evan, I'll
Yeah.
just add, this is Amy. I'll just add to that as well that, we're tracking these questions and we noted them as well. We'll do a little bit more research and get back to you on that particular project just to see if we can have any additional information that would be helpful regarding that for the decentralized funds.
Yeah, thank you, Amy. Thanks for chiming in there. And decentralized, like Andrew has said, it's a little bit different, very important, and that 9 million is a relatively small pot of funds, but it's really critical. We have a lot of septic tanks, a lot of decentralized systems in Georgia, and in many states in the country. So it's an important piece of funding. But since it's sort of a one-time, GEFA doesn't have this pot of funds every year for decentralized. I would encourage any applicants in this area, especially for the decentralized, to follow Amy's advice and be very specific and descriptive. Because it will, there is a scoring system, there's prioritization, etc. But a lot may come down to you being able to describe your project in terms of which projects get funded here. So wanted to reiterate that. Okay, thanks for that question, Courtney. Let's see. Richard is asking if we have multiple projects, should we submit individually or collectively? For example, a backup generator for one facility and flooding resilience for a different facility. Andrew, you want to take that one or start off on there?
Yeah, please submit separate. That separate projects, they get scored, they may score differently. You don't want to jeopardize, yes, not jeopardize, but you don't want to have a project impacted by, it could be a very good project, but some component doesn't score very well or something like that. So separate projects, separate applications, please, or pre-applications.
Okay, all right. Anyone else want to chime in on that? Okay, great. We have someone asking, do you accept applications from universities for research projects focused on improving resilience? Universities typically do not have scopes for loan repayment. And that was touched on a little bit before, but I'll see if Andrew wants to add anything, and then if Kevin wants to chime in as well.
We can have projects from universities, but we would just need to know what the project is and how it would meet the eligibility and the funding, and then, as Stacy mentioned, the repayment if it was not 100% principal forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
And I would only add what Andrew emphasized during the presentation, the requirement in the for the supplemental funding that it would be reasonably expected to result in a capital project. So we need to understand the link between the planning and potential capital projects.
That's a good point. Okay, thank you. Let's see. Does anything need to be in a community's comprehensive plan or hazard mitigation plan to create a more competitive application? For example, have backup generators on all water systems. Actually, Haley's gonna jump in on this question.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it needs to be in your comprehensive plan, but that would definitely help assist in the resiliency category, showing that these requirements have been implemented in your mitigation plan. So that could help you with scoring, but it's not necessary.
Okay, thank you, Haley. This is a pretty general question that I think we have covered, but can planning for stormwater projects, flood mitigation projects be funded? And I think Kevin just sort of hit the nail on the head there with planning, but it must be looking like it's going to result in a capital, an infrastructure project, correct? Right, we'll just leave that there. Okay. Would a project be eligible for a town that is installing a gravity sewer for a town that is switching from septic to sewer? So, septic to sewer has come up a couple times in the presentation. Andrew, do you want to tackle that one? Would a project be eligible for a town that is installing a gravity sewer for a town that is switching from septic to sewer? Sounds like there are two communities involved here.
That was going to be my question. If it's one community, like the town is just installing it to transition from septic to sewer, as long as you are in the impacted area, yes. If it's two communities, also yes. However, we would need to just make sure everything, all the two communities agree that the project needs to go forward and they all have their vested interest. It's not just one town, moving forward with the project and the other entity doesn't want it. So an MOU or something like that may be needed, but aside from that, it sounds like it would be eligible.
Great. Okay. And Amanda Carroll wanted to chime in here. Amanda?
Oh, no, Stacy, sorry. I was just helping out in the chat to say that we're
Okay.
answering it live. My apologies if I did that too soon.
That's okay. So Amanda's also putting some, definitely check the Q&A box or the chat. We're kind of answering some of the questions there as well. Let's see. Laura has put a question in, but I don't know if it's more she's looking for clarification. Andrew, Haley, Kevin, if you can look at the Q&A box, Laura just kind of maybe copied and pasted size of community, number of water system connections. She's looking at the number of points based on the number of connections. If you can see that, did Laura get that right? So she goes from 500 and under, get 15 points, all the way to 10,001 and up, get -5 points. Any comments there for Laura?
That is correct. I had to pull up our affordability score document on our website. 500 and under is 15 points added. 501 to 1500 connections is 13 points. 1501 to 3300 connections is 10 points. 3301 to 6000 connections is 6 points. 6001 to 10,000 connections is no change to your affordability score. And then communities with 10,001 or more connections, it's -5 points.
Okay, great. And I think I also see that in the chat. Okay, so we are getting the question of, are these slides going to be available after the webinar? And the question is, they're available right now, right? So it's in the chat, and I think somebody tried to put it in the Q&A box too. You can access the slides right now. Let's see. Someone is asking something a little bit more generic. What grants are available with little to no match to help small communities get generators and help with drainage problems? So we've touched on that a little bit. Anybody want to add anything else there? So I guess maybe the question relates to besides these Helene resilience funds. Andrew, do you want to take that one?
I mean, I I'm not 100% sure if the question is besides these funds, but of course these funds can be used for that. Small communities, get extra points on our scoring, so you never know. You could get more than 30% principal forgiveness here, which would decrease um, the community input funding wise.
Okay, yeah,
Other
great.
than that, I'm not 100% sure. Haley may know FEMA, GEMA programs that could do that. Haley, do you have any ideas?
Um, Off the top of my head, no, but if this is something that your community is looking into, definitely send us an email and we will look into other funding opportunities if that's the case, for sure.
Great, thank you. And this is probably a good time, besides these funds from GEFA, there's a group called the Funders Forum, and maybe Liz can drop the link to those tables. And you can explore some other funding options if that's what the question is partly about. Also, I will say, like, if depending on the size of the community, Georgia Rural Water Association is a great resource, and they help with, among other things, they help with disaster stuff. I know sometimes they have generators, sometimes they have, trucks that they can deploy sort of temporarily to a community that's been affected. So that's another resource that you may want to look into. Okay. We have another question here about the Funders Forum next week. So and the cost and the promo code for that. So we'll drop that promo code in the chat. You'll see for our planning purposes in terms of how much lunch to cater and that kind of thing, we are asking folks to pay a small registration fee. However, especially for your local government, if you use the promo code that you're going to see in the chat here in a moment, Liz is going to drop that in. It is earlier in the chat as well. Then it will waive that fee. So we welcome everyone to come to that Funders Forum next week and hear more about, among other things, this Helene Resilience funding. So, okay, let's see. We have another question that popped into the Q&A box. Are stormwater projects that increase resilience to flood-prone areas or were impacted by Helene eligible for stormwater projects that do not have a facility ID? Let's see, who wants to take that one in terms of our panelists? Facility ID seems like a very specific term. So the question is sort of general, we've heard it before in terms of stormwater projects and resilience being eligible. But in this case, for stormwater projects that do not have a facility ID, any of our panelists want to take that one?
I may have to ask Amy or Chris to clarify, but I don't think there's any issue with them applying for funding. I think they would be eligible.
It would need to be tied to protecting the POTW. So it still will need a MPDS permit number associated. So that whoever the municipality that has a POTW would need to be the applicant.
Correct. Yes, I agree with Chris. The way that it was written is that it must be a POTW for the Clean Water SRF. It has to be tied to a POTW as the applicant on the clean water side, unless it's for the decentralized funds.
Okay, great. Thank you, Amy and Chris. And a POTW is a publicly owned treatment works. I guess most people on this call would be familiar with that term, but okay. All right, let me just check quickly here. One other question that we have is, can the design and implementation of stormwater projects and green infrastructure be considered under flood reduction? I think we've had that in a couple different forms. Anything to add there? Can the design and implementation of stormwater green infrastructure be considered under flood reduction?
I would just say yes, as long as it has that connection to POTW, like Amy just mentioned.
Mm-hmm. And again,
And that it's reasonably expected to result in the capital project.
Yeah.
Right, an infrastructure project. Okay. And we talked about this for decentralized, it being very important that you describe your situation, you make your case. This is sort of a new area for funding for GEFA, but for all of the areas, right? We'll be, it will behoove you to give good descriptions in your application. So Brandon is asking an interesting question here. Can this funding be used in conjunction with any federal funding? And I guess he means any other federal funds.
I
I
can
can start an answer to that, and maybe we'll kick it over to Amy. But specifically, as we understand it, two different federal funding sources couldn't pay for the same specific project component. They could go into a similar project. I think even Chris used an example, maybe one funding source, for instance, if it were a new wastewater treatment plant, if one funding source purchased the property, whereas the other funding source paid for the building of the plant, that could be eligible, but there couldn't be specific overlap on a specific project component between two different federal funding sources. And I'd ask Amy or Chris to add to that or clarify.
I think you got it, Kevin. That is true. You are eligible to co-fund a project from two different pots of federal grants. However, you have to have a clear and distinct scope of work. Two pots of funding cannot pay for the same scope of work. So if your project is eligible, or if you're able to show that, this scope of work was paid for by SAM funds and this scope of work was paid for by this, and keep it separate, then co-funding is eligible.
Okay, thank you. And just to reiterate, like Amy used the term SAM, and like Judy mentioned at the beginning, that's sort of EPA's term and how they're referring and how they're pronouncing that acronym. But it is in Georgia, it's being called the Helene Resilience Funding. So just to not confuse folks, keep that in mind. Okay, there has been a lot in the chat among the panelists. If there was anything that I did not say live, that needs to be reiterated, this would be a good time for the panelists to help me out with that. Right now, we've addressed all the questions from the participants, but is there anything in the chat among your discussions between EPA, GEFA folks, Kevin, that we want to highlight?
I think we've covered most of it, so I'm not seeing anything that we need to highlight specifically.
Okay. All right, great. Well, again, there's a great web page that GEFA is maintaining that has a lot of details on this program. You should have a link in the chat of if you heard about the webinar today. So most likely you're already on GEFA's mailing list, if you will, where they send out these constant contact sort of newsletters. If not, there's a link for you to do that in terms of hearing more about Helene Resilience Funds and other programs at GEFA. And then there is the workshop next week too, where you can hear more about this program as well as others. But with that, I would like to thank all the panelists. Y'all did excellently on the time. We were a little concerned because there was a lot of content, but yeah, we were right on time with the content. And then the panelists, besides the panelists doing a good job, the participants, the audience had a lot of great questions. So again, there's going to be some follow-up in terms of office hours that GEFA is going to send out to all of the registrants to today's webinar. And you can sign up for these half-an-hour slots to just get direct assistance with your community on this funding opportunity. Liz has just put in the chat here, you can save the chat. There should be 3 dots at the side of the chat box there, and you should be able to hit that, and then the top option should be Save Chat. But again, thank you all thanks to the panelists and the participants for a really engaging webinar today. Y'all take care.
Hey, Stacy, I'm sorry. I know you asked if we had a comment, and I'm sorry.
Okay.
I was reading to make sure there was nothing in the chat, and I was still processing. I just want to reiterate that when y'all go look at your affordability scores, and if you do not see a score underneath score with connections, we are taking that from the water rates dashboard. And please reach out to UGA to make sure that your water rates information is completely up to date. And that information can be found through there of who to contact. So that's another way just to make sure that your rates are up to date, because that's looked at not only by GEFA, but other funding entities like CDBG and USDA.
It's a great point, Amanda. And I have not kept up enough with the chat. It's been so busy to see. Did someone drop the link to that dashboard, the rates dashboard in there?
Yes, yes,
Okay,
they did.
great.
Mhm.
And there is an email address to UGA to get your information updated or corrected if it's not, because like Amanda said, there's a lot riding on that. And it's a lot for UGA to keep up with all of the information for 500 plus utilities in the state. So it's on you to reach out to them if you have corrections. All right. Okay. All right. Well, that we will we'll say good afternoon. Thanks for joining, and we'll see you next time.